Good evening, everyone. This is Nancy Davidson, and I'm the chair of the Environmental Board, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the March 24th, 2021 meeting. So I have a few things to talk about before we get into our agenda items, and so I have a script to read. Due to the virtual format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We have participants attending by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you're having technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device, such as a smartphone or a tablet, or you can call in to the meeting in the invite to use the call-in number that was provided in the invite. That's kind of a summary of that, and I have more information to share to the public when they're able to join us under our public comment item of the agenda. With that, I'd like to start with the attendance. So Megan, do you want to do a roll call for us, please? Thank you.
Yes, and also before the meeting, we were practicing raising hands. So if you have your hand raised, if you want to lower that, thank you. All right, roll call. Nancy Davidson.
Present.
Thank you. Jamie Finch.
Yep.
Cameron Fisher.
Present.
Rishi Hazra is not with us this evening. Dan Hintz.
Here.
Laura Labico. I have not seen join us yet this evening. Danny Madden.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Surya Bola Pragada.
Here.
And Janet Wall.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. The next item on our agenda, and this is Nancy Davidson again, the chair, is the approval of the minutes from the March 10th, 2021 meeting. Are there any comments on that agenda item? Okay, the chair has comments. After reviewing them on page 9 of the minutes under the final action, I went back and reviewed our tape of our meeting, and the final action, the motion is not stated properly in the minutes, and it should state approval of the recommendation report on the EV charging ordinance as amended. And for those of you that can't pull that up, it says right now as presented. So my recommendation is that we change those last two words to as amended. And if there are no comments on those changes to the minutes or any other changes, please signify in the chat box if you have any other changes. Any comments on my comments on the changes? With seeing none, the minutes are now approved. The next section of the agenda, someone have something else to add? Okay, I'm going to move on. The next section of the agenda is public comments. And this is Nancy again, Davidson, the chair, and I'd like to provide some guidelines for the public comments. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions that this board and other committees make. For the members of the public joining us, welcome. If there's anyone in the meeting now who would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, if you're on the phone, press *3. If you have joined by computer or a smartphone, look for the hand icon. This varies by device. One option may be to go to the participant panel, which is down in the right-hand corner of my computer at least, and select your name and then choose raise a hand. Or it may be also located under the reactions menu or more menu. So at this point, we'll wait a minute to see if anyone raises their hand to provide public comment to us. When you do provide public comments, please unmute your microphone, state your name, address, and relationship to the city. Like, are you a resident, property owner, or business owner? Speak clearly and pause frequently, and please try to limit your comments to 5 minutes. Please mute your microphone when you're done. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if you have a connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if you are able to. And with that, Megan will begin to call on the public. Thank you.
Hello, this is Megan, and this is a little bit of a new platform. So I will go through each of the members of the public that we have on here and double check if you want to provide comment. So no, don't worry if you're not raising your hand, but you still want to provide comment. And I will start with the people who emailed. So Dave Osmer, I'm now going to bring you up to a panelist, so you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn on your video if you'd like. So you should now be able to unmute yourself and provide comment. And the mute button is towards the bottom of the screen.
Okay, I found it. Thank you, Megan. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dave Osmer. I live in North Issaquah, and it's a pleasure to see a couple of familiar faces among you, Danny and Ann. Good evening. I just have a question. There are numerous environmental impacts involved with the Issaquah School District's proposed development of the Providence Heights property in North Issaquah. These impacts include a significant loss of mature tree canopy and, in keeping with the theme of tonight's meeting, a significant increase in the volume of stormwater exiting the site, since the site will become somewhere between 67 and 75% impervious. Furthermore, the district has previously stated that they are not seeking green building certification for the proposed buildings planned for the site. Since these and several other environmental issues would seem to place the proposed project squarely in your charter, will the Environmental Board have the opportunity to review this proposed development? And that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And we are providing comments at this time. Overall, I can provide a quick answer on that the Environmental Board doesn't review projects, but there's other processes for getting involved in comments on projects, so I can follow up with you. So I will now go to Connie Marsh in just a moment. Okay, Connie, you should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your video.
Okay, look at that. And now start video goes up. Alrighty, look at that. Hi. So you should be able to see me and hear me, and I'm seeing waves, so good. My name is Connie Marsh, and I live up on Squawk Mountain, and I love stormwater. Sort of my brain, as I go through Issaquah, translates Issaquah through water, right? You start at the top, and it rains and it snows, and the water wants to funnel its way down all of the slopes and head toward Lake Sammamish. And it does that either sometimes in a very nice controlled method, or sometimes we get a lot of rain and a lot of snow and we get a lot of flooding. And so when we look at stormwater in Issaquah, we have a long history of flooding, and we have a long history of trying.
Connie, I'm not hearing your audio. Is anyone else hearing her?
I lost her. We have a long history.
A long history.
Got it.
So, am I back?
Yes.
I am back. Okay. Okay. So long history of water. I'm gonna talk faster and start shaking your heads this way if you can no longer hear me, and I'll call in. Okay. So stormwater is actually also our surface water and the water that our fish live in and our critter habitat. And so when you start looking at stormwater, we have to look at the quality of the water and the quantity of water. And that's basically what all this stormwater program is about, except for the fact that we also drink the water that is beneath us. And so we also have to allow enough water to infiltrate into our aquifer so that we actually have a potable water system. So it's really super complicated when we look at our stormwater manual. So I ask, is it working? Because our fish populations are going down, our kokanee are nearly extinct. We've had to go to regional water because we're building out beyond the capacity of our aquifer, and we still flood. So when we look at basically our stormwater manual and our management plan, I would ask the general questions is it working? What are the areas where it is not working? And how do we change those to make them work? Because we want to keep the fish, we don't want to flood, and we want to continue to be able to use the potable water that we have used for many, many years. And so the presentations today feel, very complex, and they have a lot of sort of jargon in them, but I think that is the basic concept is what we are doing working, and then how do we try to make it so it actually works best, and what are the mechanisms that we need to get there, and then how do we measure to make sure that we are actually getting what we want, which is humans, fish, and no flooding, all cohabitating in an elegant way. And so what I'm trying to do is just create an overarching picture in your brain of a system that's really at 60,000 feet, because I think the details are hard to understand if you get down into the jargon. But if you just keep asking, what is it that we want, and is what we're actually doing now working, and then how can we change it to make it better, we might actually get something better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie. I will now move you back to an attendee. And I see we have two other members of the public on the call, a couple other members of the public on the call. So again, if you'd like to make comment, you can go ahead and raise your hand, which should be in the participant screen. Since this is a newer platform for us, I am going to go through each of the members of the public to give you an opportunity to speak if you'd like. If you do not want to speak, that is fine. So I'm going to start with Ann Fletcher. Okay, Ann, if you'd like to provide public comment, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I don't want to make any public comment. I'm just here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Kapler, if you'd like to provide public comment, you can unmute yourself now. If not, that is fine. All right, I will go ahead and make you an attendee. And one more person, Christy Triple, I will go ahead and make you a panelist. If you'd like to provide public comment, you can unmute yourself now. If not, that is fine. All right, I will make you an attendee. We will not need to do that every time, but since we're again learning this kind of new platform, I did want to make sure we give everyone a chance to speak if they wanted to. So we are now done with the public comment portion, Nancy.
Great, thank you all for your comments on our agenda and other items in the city. Our next agenda item is introductions of board members, and this is something that's been requested by one or two of the members. It's fairly challenging, all of us being in a virtual environment and not actually ever having a chance to kind of talk offline or just get to know each other. So the goal of this is to introduce yourself and why this board was important to you and what you're passionate about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to kind of go through the members, and I plan on going last, Megan, just putting my pitch in there at this point. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Megan to call on you.
All right, I'll go ahead in alphabetical order. So Jamie, you are up.
Jamie here. Glad I get to lead this off and set the stage for everyone. So I think the pieces of information that most of you know is that I've been in Issaquah for about 2 or 3 years now. I'd been renting in the area and then decided to settle down here because of a lot of different reasons, but primarily the access to recreation and just the amazing area around the city. So that's what brought me to Issaquah, and that kind of outdoors is that focus for me has always been a part of a lot of different decisions in my life, and it also is central to why I wanted to join the environmental board. As you can also probably see from behind me, I'm very much into mountain biking and other ways of accessing the outdoors. For work, I work at the central office for Mod Pizza, so not exactly the environmental. It's pizza, which is delicious, but doesn't exactly always connect with some of my really core passions, which relate to how to protect the natural environment and really how do I give back to something that myself and my partner Sam and my friends, we really get so much from being able to experience the natural environment. So she's a big gardener, so we get stuff from the garden, recreation, etc. So yeah, that's really the core of what want to get involved, and as well as just really where my passions lie. I think beyond that, Nancy could probably tell you if she walked by my house anytime recently. A big focus for me is my house is from that I bought about a year ago is from 1900, so it needs a little bit of work, and so that it's kind of cool actually because it was a coal miner's cabin, which is an interesting full circle to be sitting as an environmental board member in what was originally built as a coal miner's cabin. But a lot of house projects are necessary to keep water out of the house and other sort of key just ways to stay comfortable. But yeah, I enjoy those, and that's really taken up a lot of time and been a good pandemic distraction. But yeah, beyond that, I'm super excited to get to know all of you better and continue to learn as being a part of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Cameron.
Cameron Fisher here. I've been in Issaquah for about 10 years, in the US for about 20 years, 22 years, originally from New Zealand. And my wife and I, and we have kids here that are growing up, and I was previously on the Rivers and Stream Board, and seeing the expansion of the oversight of the boards from the Rivers and Stream to the environmental was rather appealing to me. I own 2 small businesses in Issaquah. One of them is an environmental consultant, and so seeing my professional background and the the local feel of my community, and just seeing the kids growing up in this area. I wanted to make sure, you know, things are going well and are in the right direction. We've got a wonderful group, set of natural resources in this area that I want to see sustainably managed. And that was the reason I joined the Rivers and Stream Board originally, and then moving into the Environmental Board. It was quite appealing opportunity for me. So I'll keep it short and sweet, but thanks very much for letting me sit on the board.
Thank you. Next up is Dan.
Great. Dan Hintz here. I think similar, been in Issaquah for a few years. Originally a transplant from the Midwest, grew up outside of Chicago. My background in my undergraduate was in economics, but did a certificate in environmental studies, and that's really what piqued my interest, specifically in ecological restoration. So I was actually interning at the University of Wisconsin, Madison Arboretum, where Aldo Leopold did a lot of his original work and really got passionate about that as a younger person. And yeah, I was pulling garlic mustard in woods in Wisconsin. It was like my first introduction to to habitat restoration and, you know, invasive species, and really just kind of getting excited about the, you know, the botany, you know, specifically within our you know, ecosystems in the Midwest. And then, you know, found an opportunity to move out to Seattle for an AmeriCorps position, which was a really great opportunity after college with Earth Corps. I'm sure some of you are familiar with them, but that really got amazing hands-on experience on the ground doing trail and recreation work, restoration work, and just becoming really passionate about the landscape here in Western Washington. So that was in 2009, and I have not left since. And this is definitely home to me now. My wife and I have, like I said, been in Issaquah for a couple of years, and kind of similar to Jamie, just, I mean, it's such an amazing jumping off point, you know, for connection to nature. And that's, you know, where I'm really just passionate about is, you know, finding that, you know, individually, as communities, as, you know, people that don't necessarily have the you know, kind of innate interest we have in you know, our natural systems here. How do we get those people you know, more comfortable to get out into nature, to connect, to realize, you know, what a lot of us know is so valuable for obviously our you know, the environmental health of our area, but you know, just individually, you know, I'm just such a strong believer of the mental health and the physical health, you know, that having connections to nature provides in our communities. And so yeah, like I said, my background is definitely in botany. I got a master's degree in environmental horticulture from UW a few years ago. Also have a certificate in wetland science and management. So some of this stuff in the presentations around the Clean Water Act and, you know, what triggers a lot of this is, you know, definitely stuff I'm at least a little bit familiar with. But yeah, a lot of the work I do, I've been with people are familiar with the Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust for about 5 years, managing our restoration projects. So it's a lot of invasive species removal, you know, working with people like Janet, you know, and really looking at how we can, you know, protect, restore, enhance, you know, specifically the aquatic environments here in Issaquah. So that's a lot of work on Issaquah Creek, Tibbetts Creek, stuff that I'm just really passionate about. Tom being a neighbor on the creek here that's been really committed to that. I mean, there's so many people here that I know have been have those similar feelings, and it's really inspiring. And, you know, joining this board gets me a little bit out of my practitioner role of someone on the ground doing this work and getting a little bit more, as I appreciated Connie saying, looking at the big picture, how the policy comes together, how we make these decisions as a community, at the city, you know, at the county, state, you know, level as well. So this is going to be a really great learning experience, but hopefully bring, you know, pretty solid background on, you know, some of the ecological systems we're working with here. And yeah, like I said, really, yeah, not hesitating to say that I'm a huge tree hugger and tree lover too. So when it comes down to it, something I'm very passionate about is our forest here too. So yeah, sorry I was a little rambling, but I think I'll leave it at that and let whoever is up here go next.
Great, thank you. Next is Laura.
That's a fast alphabet. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Hello. So I am Laura. I am, like the rest of everyone, not from around here. I actually grew up in California, then moved to the Midwest where I went to college. But I kind of identify as being from New York City. I lived there for about 6 or 7 years before I came out here to be closer to my family who had migrated out here. So after moving here, I ended up living on a houseboat for a little while and then moved out. But I think those kind of mix of backgrounds explains my weirdness and why I fit in here. I got really passionate about from the different places I've lived, how important it is to community to be able to walk around and to be able to meet your neighbors, even if you don't have a reason to know them, and how much that benefits us. And then likewise, when I lived on the houseboat, I really came to believe that it's interesting to have that much intimacy with the things that live around you that don't need you, but that you impact. And I think that here, that's especially important, that Seattle is sort of the last frontier of wildness, and the interface that Issaquah has with wilderness is really powerful. And I hate to see the opportunity to save it and to protect it squandered. So I wanted to be a part of it. I have a background in strategic planning and consulting, and I actually decided to go back to grad school and to work on sustainability in urban environments for this kind of stuff, to make them greener, but also kind of what Dan said, more pleasant. It benefits everything by making places greener. So I am actually studying that. And another reason I wanted to be involved is because my family is here. So I have a little niece, 2 nieces and a nephew who I take hiking all the time. And when I get back, they ask me what I saw. If I went by myself, they always say, "What did you see?" And they need a report back. So I do a ton of hiking. My boots are literally falling apart, which is a bummer. I do a lot of paddleboarding over at Lake Sammamish. If you ever see anyone there in the middle of the winter, it's me. And I do a lot of cycling as well. So I'm outside a lot. So I believe that it's all important. But yeah, so it's interesting. It's neat because in grad school, we're learning so much about all of these things. So I have access to a lot of cutting edge stuff. So it's fun to apply it somewhere, not just on a piece of paper.
Thank you. And Laura, just so you know, your microphone's a little scratchy. We could hear you, but just for next time you speak, if there's anything, but we could hear you. Thank you. And alphabetical by last name up is Danny Madden.
Hi, I'm Danny, and I'm a student here. I'm a senior right now at Issaquah High School. I've been living in this area for 4 years now. I've actually moved quite a lot. I was originally in India, and then we moved to Ireland, and then New York, and then Connecticut, and then Ohio, and then here. But I love it here. It's amazing. I absolutely fell in love with Washington, with Issaquah. The natural beauty, just like everyone was saying, it's gorgeous. And I especially in school, I started to learn about, environmental impacts and like the things that we do. And I don't know, I kind of was just really inspired to finally like do something, especially by my environmental science teacher. And so that inspired me to reach out to Anne, and I joined People for Climate Action. And then I also, worked closely with Megan and got involved in like a food waste project and that kind of thing. So, just trying to do whatever I can, trying to make an impact. And that's kind of what this board was for me as well. A chance to make an impact, a chance to do something, and then also, a chance to learn, because that's been one of the best parts of all of this, I think, is just making connections and like meeting so many amazing people who have like crazy environmental fervor and like knowledge and passion, and that is just so wonderful to like live in a community where like people are really passionate about doing stuff. I don't know, it's all really cool. And yeah, so that's just, yeah.
Thank you, Danny. Don.
Hi, Don McWilliams. I grew up in the area. I've been here since I was 6, originally in Woodinville, but I've been on the I-90 corridor since 95 after I graduated from college. My educational background's in environmental science, and my professional background is working for one of our neighboring cities for the last 20 years, first in natural resources, then in the stormwater world since 2008. So tonight's topic is near and dear. I serve on several regional committees for stormwater around the area. I'm actually out in Preston, so I'm just outside of Issaquah, but that's I live on the I-90 corridor because I spend a lot of time in the mountains up here, whether it be snowboarding, mountain biking, hiking. So it's important for me to be close to that. And what interested me about joining this board was it's my local city, and I want to see the streams and lakes and our waters of Issaquah be preserved and enhanced the best they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne.
Okay. I'm Ann Newcomb, and I have lived in Washington my entire life. I was born here and moved to Issaquah in 1984. Before that, I worked down in Hobart at a leather shop, and I'd never been to Issaquah before. And when I was in high school, we had a booth, and I came, and it was for Salmon Days, and I came and I don't know, you guys have probably all been to Salmon Days now, right? There's like 200,000 people. Well, it was just a few people. So I was on the corner where the library is now, which used to be a gas station, I think. And just people would stroll by, you know, every few minutes, like every 5 minutes or so, and I'd hand them a card. So things have changed a lot. Got to see a lot of flooding back then as well in the 80s. When I moved here in 1984, 85, 86, I think is when the flooding was maybe. And they were 100-year floods. And then people realized that they weren't really 100-year floods, and it could be fixed through proper management of the water. And I really love kayaking on Lake Sammamish and paddleboarding, and love hiking in the woods on all of our mountains, and really enjoy looking out of Tiger Mountain out of this window and Squak Mountain out of the window in front of me here. And I'm grateful that I get to be active with the Issaquah Alps Trails Club. I'm on that board as well. And because of the Issaquah Alps Trails Club, we have a lot of this open space and green mountains because of their dedication over the past 40 years to preserve land. So the whole life I've been concerned with the environment, and in the past few years, since 2012 or so, I've been really concerned about climate change. And so I've been active with different groups like the Sierra Club, and working to bring clean energy to our area. And then a few years ago, I started working more with Issaquah, with People for Climate Action and Issaquah Alps Trails Club, and got to help with Megan with the climate convening. I just realized that I really love working. This is such a great town and such sweet people. I love working here with everybody on projects that are my passion. So the environmental board seemed like a natural thing to join. I really appreciate being here. I had written something, but I didn't follow it at all. But I think I hit all the points I need to. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Tom.
Sorry, I wasn't ready with the unmute. Is my audio coming through? Good. Well, so I'm a retired engineer, and I've lived in Issaquah here for 42 years now. Actually, more than that, but most recently, the last 42 years. I actually lived next door to the house I lived in when I was a kid. But managed to come back and buy the property right next to it and build a house on it, and I've been here ever since. And as Dan alluded to, so I live on Issaquah Creek, and so issues of stormwater management and all that are near and dear to me as well. And thank you, Dan, and the Mountains of Sound Greenway for their help on some issues I have. The disgusting Japanese knotweed has been a culprit that they've helped me get under control and planting of native species, etc. So that's been good. But it wasn't the thing that brought me or got me interested in this board was not so much the stormwater thing, but just the public lands and access to public lands. Issaquah as the trailhead city, Issaquah in the midst of the wilderness within. I'm also involved with the Issaquah Trails Club, and this is just such a defining attribute of life in Issaquah. Our wonderful access to the trails and the public lands of surrounding Issaquah and the parklands of Issaquah within the city limits. These are all great things, and I want to do what I can do, make sure we don't lose sight of that wonderful resource and keep it alive and well. The stormwater management, though, is also important to me, so it's with great interest that I see that we're tackling that sort of issue. Ruth Keys actually knocked on my door. This is like back in the 80s. And told me what an aquifer was. That was not in my vocabulary until she educated me on that matter. And it isn't magic that there's water under the ground. It gets there from the surface, and we need to protect and nurture that valuable resource, or we won't have it. And Issaquah gets most of its water right now from those wells, those pumping the water out of the aquifer, and it's a valuable thing we need to protect. So I'm very interested in the stormwater management thing. Although I don't know, is there a conflict of interest for someone who lives on the creek to get involved with regulations relating to stormwater? I don't know. Well, that's enough. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Saria.
Hi, my name is Surya, and I'm a junior at Issaquah High School. I've lived in Issaquah for the last 10 years, and before that I lived in Redmond, so pretty much in the area. And the way I kind of got into this was like back in 4th grade, our school started like a green team, and I was a part of it, and this was like a 4th grade green team, so it was very minor. But my old teacher kind of told us about this volunteer opportunity, and I asked my dad to go, and we went, and this kind of became like a weekly activity for us. Like basically every Sunday from then every Saturday from then we'd volunteer with a bunch of different environmental groups, like King County Parks and even like Mountains of Sound Greenway. And it's just been like a lot of organizations and a lot of volunteering. So it's like a lot of field work. And I guess that kind of accumulated in me wanting to join this board and transferring that field work into actual legislative action and trying to make an impact as much as possible. And like actually in my old job, my managers used to get like not mad, but they'd be like, "Oh my God, Surya, you're gone again because you're volunteering on Saturdays." And so yeah, I guess that's why I'm here. And I've always felt like my dad has always told me about how privileged we are to be in such a beautiful area, and he's always like instilled that it's our duty as a generation to protect that. And maybe something in this, or the work that we do on this board, can accumulate to something I can do in my future to continue to preserve Issaquah and how beautiful it is. And yeah.
Thank you. Janet.
All right. Sorry, I wasn't prepared either. Okay, I originally came from Ohio on the shores of Lake Erie and went to got my college degree not too far from there in biology. And I came out here to Seattle to get my master's degree at the University of Washington at the College of Fisheries. So my career was, most of it was with the observer program. And occasionally I got a chance to go out myself on some of the ships and on Japanese and Soviet ships. And I also used my vacation time to go on long trips across Africa and across Asia. So I still like to travel. And anyway, when I retired, I decided to come out to Issaquah because I was a little bit wanted to have a garden and to be close to the mountains, which I love. I did join the Mountaineers and the Issaquah Alps, and I'm very much involved with, mostly involved with habitat restoration. So every summer I'm tackling the noxious weed tansy ragwort. And this time of year I've been working on with a group up on the Tradition Plateau pulling out holly. So plus working on blackberries and other various things. So anyway, I've been very concerned about climate change and other matters of biology. That's about all I have.
Great. Thank you, Janet. It's been wonderful to hear all of these. So now we will end with Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson, and I've been in the greater Seattle area for about 38 years. Most recently in Issaquah in 2 stages, one in the late 90s or the 90s and 2000s. And then most recently the last couple of years. So I've spent about 20 years in Issaquah. I'm a civil and environmental engineer and got a master's in environmental engineering, and I've worked for local governments in the greater Seattle area for all of that time. My career included working for the city of Seattle in the drinking water and the wastewater program, King County Department of Natural Resources on salmon recovery, wastewater and reclaimed water. And then I worked for various other agencies and consultants, and I retired recently from the city of Snoqualmie, where I was responsible for operations of public works, including all kinds of aspects of water, wastewater, and stormwater, and transportation. So I've worked for governments. I've been a key player in many of these areas. I'm very passionate about salmon recovery and watersheds. Did a master's degree. I got my master's thesis was all done on watersheds and watershed planning. So this kind of fits my area of expertise and my knowledge. I have spent some time on the local city council. So I did that early in my last stint in Issaquah. And I learned a lot about how government works and how to make things different. And I'd like to apply my knowledge to this board to help figure out how to do things a little more holistically. I think the council has a great opportunity to do some really good things for the city with the development that's going on. And I think we are a key player. And my goal is to help us bring the city to the next era of it. So that's kind of where I'm at. Anyway, with that, I think we're done with the segment. Correct, Megan? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next agenda topic. We have an active agenda yet tonight. So our next agenda is, let me pull up my iPad here since I'm multitasking, is a discussion about the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan, and it'll be presented by folks from the Public Works, Gary Shimmick and Alan Quinn. And just to give you a little context, I did have an opportunity to talk with Gary a little bit about this presentation, and got a little more clarity to try and help us all understand it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
Thank you, Nancy, and to the entire board. That was really, I feel very honored to have an opportunity to listen to all of your stories. A lot of similarities there in my life as well, too. So again, my name is Gary Shimmick, the relatively new utilities engineering manager here at Issaquah. Been about a month, but I have been in the business for about 30 years. I'll tell you a little bit, but really I can just say I think I'm cloned from Nancy. We talked yesterday, and you're going to hear a lot of same words. So prior to Redmond, prior to Issaquah, I was at Redmond, Seattle Public Utilities, and Renton. And then that was about 20 years. And the 10 years prior to that, academic work at UW here and at Wisconsin as well. And then a consulting engineer. So all in the environmental science and engineering realm, the master's in civil environmental engineering and undergrad. So my colleague, Alan Quinn, he's a senior stormwater engineer here, and I, where we're discussing the storm and surface water master plan update. We also have two key members of our distinguished consultant team from OTAC here, Russ Gaston and Trista Kabluski. If there's questions more detailed that we'd like to talk to them about, that's fine. And as Nancy mentioned, I did tweak the slides a little bit from what's in your packet based on our discussion. And really shout out to her. It was really a helpful conversation we had yesterday. And I appreciated that. Just also want to mention something Connie and Dan said too before I get into this. So Connie, I'm going to try to keep this as jargon free as possible. I agree with you. And I love your comments on performance measures. That's kind of something that I bring here for my work at Redmond and at SPU. And Dan, as I mentioned, I'm a Wisconsinite. I spent so much time biking and walking through the Arboretum. You brought back so many memories for me thinking about that. So one of the most beautiful places on earth. Everybody needs to go. So before I start to the slide deck, just wanted to say three things to prep this talk and about the master plan. So the master plan process that we're kind of in the middle of, but we have a long way to go, provides us the opportunity as a community, really, not as Public Works, not as a city, but as a community to identify and address the highest priority stormwater issues in a very strategic management approach, as opposed to developing a plan on an annual basis just on the hottest items that are in front of us. So really, this planning process allows us to be proactive rather than reactive, and then will allow us to track our success or failures over time. And if we have failures, then we can diverge from them and try something different. Second, the plan provides us the opportunity to reach out to all of our stakeholders, like you, to develop a comprehensive vision based on community values rather than just on engineering, technology, and feasibility. No dissing engineers, I'm one myself, but it's not about the engineering, right? It's about the triple bottom line which is cost, social values, and environmental values. We need to take all those into account. And then finally, this plan, is a requirement, and we need to meet that. But what you're going to find out a little bit, we're going well beyond our requirement because we're Issaquah, and if you just hearing all of your stories, that translates to why we're doing more than we need to do just to meet our permit. So I'm going to share my screen now. Practice once, so this should go well. Okay, is everybody able to see share the PowerPoint side?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. So we'll stay here, and if you'd like me to stop sharing at any point, just let me know. I'm going to move to the second slide right away. Double click. There we go.
Gary, before you get too much further, this is Nancy Davidson. Do you want questions along the way, or do you want us to wait till the end?
Oh, I am totally, I think Alan and I are totally fine either way, Nancy. I just guess I'd leave it to you in terms of how we're doing on time. But I'm cool, and I think Alan's cool with getting questions as if there's a burning question as well. Thank you for asking.
All right, if anyone has a burning question, please identify in the chat that you'd like to make a comment or a question, and I'll try and call on you, but we have a limited amount of time here, so go ahead.
All right, thank you. So Ellen and I will be providing overview of our process to develop and complete this plan, status report on the work completed to date, and then our plans for the remainder of the year. Most of the work that has been completed to date has really been associated with understanding our baseline conditions, which a lot of you talked about in terms of our problem issues and our physical water characteristics. But these items are the foundation that we're going to build the rest of the plan on. So that's why it has taken so long and why we devoted a significant amount of effort to it. Alan and I will also be seeking your feedback, as Nancy said, during the presentation's fine or at the end. And we have 6 specific questions that we'd like your general responses on at the end. And so briefly, looking at the slide, what we want to cover today, so there's no surprises. The feedback plan, a little bit of context for our planning and regulatory world, our desired outcomes, excuse the typo there, an overview, stakeholder engagement, the basin characteristics and issues we're facing, strategies, options, and prioritization, and then climate change. That's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I know that we've heard that from many of you today. And then feedback and next steps. So, we're seeking feedback from a lot of folks, as I mentioned, but particularly I want to focus on you, this board. So tonight, again, we're going to be taking your feedback on general comments that you have, and then also six specific questions at the end. But that's not it, right? This is just the start of our conversation with you. We're going to be coming back, I believe, at least 2 times. One, we'll talk about policies, goals, and performance measures, performance targets. And then one towards the end of the year on our actions, which will include just not only projects, but also other types of work, such operational and maintenance work and operating programs, and maybe and policies. So the questions at the end, just to not leave it be a teaser for you, we're going to ask you about our process and schedule, some prioritization metrics we'll be using, and the geographic scope of this work. There'll be slides on all those 3 through the discussion. And then the 3 at the end, there won't be slides on the next 2, I should say. Portfolio balance, and what that's going to be about is how we use our ratepayer dollars and allocate them to 3 of the top issues here: flooding, water quality, and habitat restoration. Mitigation funding is going to be related to how we potentially collect and use water from the transportation fund for their mitigation projects. And then finally, climate change. So again, those will be the 6 questions at the end that we'll get to. So before we plunge in the details of the planning effort, that was important to let you know how our work fits into the larger regulatory and planning world. So another way to look at this is a list of plans, codes, guidelines that may influence our work, or we may influence that work. So there really is two-way arrows in a couple of locations. So again, this is going to be explained much more detailed in the report, and we can take questions offline on this too. But just for the 2 categories, I wanted to hit some really hot items here. So for the city, we have our comprehensive plan. We have our strategic plan. Nancy and I talked about that yesterday. We have our municipal code, titles 12, 13, 16, and 18. 18's in the process of being updated. With Megan here, Climate and Sustainability Action Plan, our first one. We just got through that at Redmond, so that's going to be going on. We have a Park Strategic Plan and a Green Necklace Plan. Central Issaquah and Old Town plans, Transportation Mobility Plan, and then here in Public Works and Water and Wastewater Master Plan. So again, we have to be cognizant of all of that work as we do ours. And then regionally and federally, again, we know we have someone here from another neighboring city. So Bellevue, Sammamish, we need to understand what their plans are. County plans, also water resource inventory area plans. So some of you may know that as WIRA 8. And how the habitat work is progressing regionally. How do we fit in there? It should be WSDOT, not WDOT. WSDOT culvert replacement programs. I just heard a presentation yesterday about, it's going to be probably $100 million worth of culvert projects along I-90 here at Issaquah and to Bellevue. So we have to coordinate with them over the next 3 to 4 years, which might present some very good opportunities. And then, of course, we talked about flooding a lot today already. So we have to coordinate with the FEMA flood insurance program. So again, a lot of work that we can influence, but that we have to be understanding of how we might be influenced by them. Okay, our desired outcomes for this plan, not just for tonight, but for the plan. In a way, and again, Nancy and I kind of talked through this a little bit. And what I guess I'd like to say to you, another way to look at this is these outcomes are what are we actually buying with our investment here of my time, Alan's time, our consultant's time, and your time really as well too. What are we going to get at the end of this? Well, what I'm hoping is first off, we're going to be developing a roadmap with this plan, and it's going to be a living document that we're going to get update as we need to and refer to as we need to reduce flooding and improve water quality and habitat throughout Issaquah. Something we're going to refer to, and again, this is not going to go on, under my watch, this is not going to be sitting on the shelf. This is going to be a live document we're all going to be using in the future. It's going to establish policy direction for us, but this policy direction will have to be, as an umbrella fit under the city comprehensive plan, fit under the city strategic plan. Here's something Connie brought up that's very important to me. Develop SMART goals, so those are specific measurable goals and performance measures over the long term. Where are all these great individual projects taking us? What are these policies doing for us? Where do we want to be in 20 years? How are we measuring that success? And that will be in the plan. Also creating a prioritized list of actions, not only capital projects. You're going to see a lot of plans across this country. I've reviewed at least, no joke, about 100 to 200 plans over the past 6 to 7 years. And most of them just focus on capital projects. We're going beyond that here. There's things we need to do operationally. Street sweeping is an example. How can we utilize street sweeping here for water quality? Education and outreach. List goes on. So it's not all about solving problems with just capital. So we just can't afford that either. We're also going to be in complying with regulations with this plan, specifically NPDES permit requirement for cities to implement stormwater management actions, planning for at least one basin, and we're going to do that for many more than one basins. And also meet our grant requirements. And Alan, reminded me, this is really important to note that we, that this, shout out to ecology, but we received a grant that allows us to go beyond the permit requirements to prioritize and implement solutions for all basins here in Issaquah, not just one. So thank you to ecology, and I believe our grant manager is on the line here today. And just a shout out for Alan and cohorts here at City for Issaquah to get the grant in the first place. So we've done a lot of great work already. And then finally, again, this came from a chat with Nancy, that this has to be aligned, that the one outcome is we're going to be aligned with our city comprehensive plan and strategies, right? We're all going to be working in unison, because plan's not going to be good if it's going in a different direction than the city comprehensive plan and strategies, or we need to influence that, right? That back to that two-way street. Okay, my final slide here before I pass it over to Mr. Quinn. Wanted to explain a little bit about our process. First off, the work that has been completed to date, since you see here way back in pre-pandemic 2019, the work that has been completed includes identification of citywide flooding, water quality and habitat issues, through, this is not just an internal staff thing, through stakeholder engagement was invaluable. And then we've also had documentation of existing basin physical characteristics such as water quality and flow. Again, through that feedback, but also through comprehensive research of our existing data and documents. And that's where our consultant, OTAC, with Russ and Trista and Alan have been a driving force of getting that work done. So as you look at the schedule, what lies ahead really is the development of the policy directives that are consistent with the city's strategic and comprehensive plan, long-term goals and associated performance targets, and then those priority actions that we talked about. So that's all to come. So we have not started on that. I've had some conversations here internally, but that's about it. So we're really going to be rolling up our sleeve for that. What you also see on here, and Alan's going to talk about on the next slide, is we want to have this consistent stakeholder engagement throughout the rest of the project, right? This again, this is not a city plan. This is a community plan in my mind. And this is going to include multiple touch points with city council, external, internal stakeholders, and then 3 boards. So in addition to yourself, the Policy and Planning Commission, and then the Economic Vitality Commission. Internally, we've been talking about maybe having some joint meetings in the future, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm committing to again coming back multiple times to you and those groups. And then we'll have I also commit to having a more crystallized engagement plan to provide to you after this meeting, but we need a little more time to work on that. And then regarding citywide collaboration, you see here on the screen, one of the big pieces is going to be working with Megan, Climate and Sustainability Action Plan, as well as what I don't have listed up here, our Title 18 code update. But just to be real clear about the coordination Megan and I will do, really she is leading the larger Climate and Sustainability Action Plan. We're going to be talking about Climate 2 in this plan, but it'll be under that umbrella, right? So we'll be working together on that. And then finally, as you can see, we are hoping to present the master plan to City Council for formal adoption in first quarter 2022, which seems like a long way away, but we've got a lot of work to do before then. So thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up the slides after Mr. Quinn goes here, but I'm going to hand it over to him right now. There you go, Alan.
Great. All right. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, my name is Alan Quinn, Senior Stormwater Engineer for the City of Issaquah. And I just want to thank the Environmental Board for allowing Gary and I to present tonight. Also feel honored to be the first to present to the board ever. So I think that's kind of cool. Just a real brief background. I'll be brief because I don't have much time. So I actually grew up in this area, was born and raised in Bellevue. Been doing stormwater for about 25 years, 2.5 years now for the City of Issaquah. And prior to that was 2.5 years down in California for the City of Rancho Cordova near Sacramento. Then prior to that, I worked for the City of Renton for 17 years. And then a consulting firm back in Baltimore for 4 years. So that's my brief background. So I think the first slide, this slide here is stakeholder engagement is extremely important. I think we really wanted to make sure that everybody was involved with this process. So we were really careful to make sure we included all stakeholders, so including utility customers, so all the residents of Issaquah, obviously the mayor and city council, environmental board, policy boards, regional cities have been involved, cities Sammamish, Bellevue, King County, the tribes. So we have the Snoqualmie Indian tribe as well as the Muckleshoot Indian tribes. They both have lived, historically fished these areas in the streams of Issaquah for hundreds and not thousands of years. Regulatory agencies, including Department of Ecology, WDFW. We also have involved some environmental nonprofits, Mountain Sounds Greenway Trust, as well as Trout Unlimited. And then, of course, internal stakeholders, city departments such as the Parks Department, operations. So really, we wanted to make sure we had a broad group of people involved in this plan. In terms of the engagement, we did 3. So to date, we've done 3 engagement points. The first was back in December of 2019, where we had an initial kickoff meeting with all external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, essentially everybody in the stakeholder list on the left, minus the city council and the environmental boards, but everyone else we involved. That was a great kickoff meeting. Really got good input about what they want to see in this plan. Then in the following ensuing 3 months, and so I guess it'd be in February of last year, we did an online survey. And that was a community-wide survey posted on our website. And that actually had a fairly good turnout. We had 74 respondents who went online, went to the website, answered some questions. The survey also included a mapping tool where folks could not only answer questions, but they could describe. And basically, the two questions we wanted answered were, where have you seen flooding in your community, and have you noticed any long-term changes in water flow in your creeks and any in water quality, and have you noticed any increase or decreases in fish? Just observations that people have made. And we did actually got a fair amount of responses, and all that information was put onto a GIS map where people could put a pin, and so we had a GIS located, and all that information then we used to input into our characterization report, which I'll go into here in a bit. So we essentially compiled all that data, and that's going to help us inform what we're going to be doing forward in terms of solutions. And then lastly, future engagement. And like Gary had mentioned earlier, we do want to make sure we talk about climate change and how that's going to impact Issaquah and with precipitation changes in the next 50 years, and how we want to design stormwater facilities in the future. Goals and strategies, I think Gary touched on that already, and then ultimately we're going to come up with our actions to address the identified problems. Basin characterization. So this really, substantial amount of work has gone in so far to put together what we're calling the basin characterization reports. And there's basically a report for each basin. There's 6 basins within the city of Issaquah, and I'll quickly name those. There's this Issaquah Creek, as we all know, it's the most significant basin. Lewis Creek, Tibbetts Creek, and we have Schneider Creek, Park Hill, Laughing Jacobs. So those are all the major creeks that we're looking at, we're analyzing. And so these basin characterization reports it really is a combination of or culmination of vast amounts of data collection and literature review, basin plans that we looked at, studies, both the counties done, the other neighboring jurisdictions have done, and of course the compiling all the known issues from the various sources, the community, from the online tool, outreach, and then mapping tool, as well as our operations department provided input in terms of what they've seen historically for flooding and water quality issues. We had existing hydraulic models and hydrologic models that we were able to update with new information, and particularly for Issaquah Creek, we developed a hydraulic model for that to come up with new revised peak flows. And we also have a pretty robust water quality sampling program in the city. Previously, that was used to develop our State of the Waters report, but we're going to use that information. Basically, there's 10 years. We have 10 years worth of data that we needed to analyze, and we've taken that data, and that's incorporated into the basin characterization report. And as part of that analysis, we identified some water quality trends, or water quality issues, and that the sampling program, and we've looked at many constituents, water quality parameters such as nutrients, heavy metals, dissolved oxygen, turbidity. So there's like 9 parameters that we sample, both base flow and stormwater and storm flows. And so all the information is in that basin characterization report, which we now have a draft version completed. Those reports have been sent off to the Department of Ecology. They're doing their review, and actually provided comments back. And so we need to look at those comments and finalize those reports. And then finally, assess influence of the built environment on receiving waters. And what that really means is how is land use really? Is it land use impacting our water bodies, our receiving waters? And so we're looking at all aspects of land use, the densities, and so forth. And then this is a identified issues table. Is a sort of a summary of the online mapping tool, as well as other and surveys that we conducted to get a tally of all the issues that we have. And so you can see there, we've got, Issaquah Creek by far has the most issues, which is not surprising. That's the largest basin within the city. And of course it goes through downtown Issaquah, so it has the most intense land use. So you're going to, would expect to see a significant amount of issues in Issaquah Creek. Less so in Lewis Creek and Laughing Jacobs Creeks. Those basins are relatively small and more residential, so they're not going to have as much issues. But nonetheless, we'll be looking at, as Gary said, we're looking at all the basins, not just one priority basin. As part of the issues identification, there's a corresponding map in the characterization reports, and this map OTAC put together, and it shows all the locations of where folks have put or have identified issues and described those issues. There's a table that has a much more detailed description of each problem, whether it's a flow control problem, water quality issue, a habitat issue. It's all in this map. And like I said, there's a corresponding table with more information, more detailed information. Next slide. And this is just a more visual aid to help people understand the process we've been following. So as you can see, we've completed the basin characterization reports. That was a significant amount of work. It took 4 or 5 months to complete it, and it involved looking at the water quality sampling that's been done, literature review, modeling, hydrologic modeling, and of course the really extensive outreach and engagement that we've done to date. That then feeds into the existing conditions, known issues, which there again is the 3 main components. We're looking at flooding, water quality, and habitat. That then goes, helps, drives what we call the strategic management options, which is another term for, projects, essentially projects. How are we going to address these issues we've identified through this characterization, analysis? Once we have a nice suite of projects, then we want to come up with some metrics. And so how are we going to prioritize all these projects, and how do we decide to weight each prioritization that we've decided we think we need to evaluate? And so that's where it's going to be important to do some outreach and get feedback as to what is the priorities for how do we want to prioritize these projects? What is important? And then finally, that's going to lead to our solutions, which really is our projects and or policies. And then that will then be the final plan that comes out of that. So solution strategies and options. So these are, here are some ways that we'll be looking at, dealing with the strategies. We have, obviously we want to, public safety is the #1 important. We want to come up with ways to reduce current flooding, localized flooding. We want to look at how to improve water quality, which of course impacts the salmon and all the aquatic species. We want to look at restoration enhancement projects, and where can we do enhancement? And Issaquah has actually done a fair amount of restoration projects along Issaquah Creek and Lewis Creek. We want to continue that tradition of doing more restoration projects in the future. And of course, acquiring open spaces and creating open spaces. And so that's important, not only for creating restoration for salmon, but it helps, attenuate flood flows if we can create floodplain, off-channel floodplain. So those are other things we're looking at. And then of course, accommodating future development and climate change. So what's the best way to anticipate how development's going to occur in the future, and to make sure that we account for future precipitation changes and how that might impact water quality and water flow. And some of the options that we're looking at, capital improvements, of course, and that's just not just building infrastructure like pipes and culverts, but that could include, as I had mentioned earlier, doing potentially regional stormwater facilities. It could be off-channel restoration projects, like where we do create flood storage. And of course, we're going to be looking at policy development and code updates. And so making changes to development code, possibly programmatic improvements and efficiencies. And Gary mentioned this earlier, that's really looking at how operations does things. Do we increase the frequency of street sweeping and frequency of cleaning out our catch basins, and then finally land use. Next slide. Metrics and prioritization. So here are the things that we've looked at with the consultant as ways of how to prioritize a project and where it ranks relative to other projects. Is it, how effective is it? Of course, that's the most important one. Does it solve the problem? Land ownership, is it in public or is it private? We want to focus on lands that we can acquire easily or that are city-owned lands and properties. Constructability, how difficult is it to construct? Are there a lot of existing utilities, conflicts? So those are things to consider. Permitting, is there extensive permitting involved with it? Some permits can take, quite a while to get if they're involved, sensitive areas and so forth. Cost and funding opportunities. So this is really, grants. So trying to leverage grants to help fund projects. And there are a lot of grant opportunities out there, particularly for salmon recovery. And so that's very important. And of course, timing and coordination with partnerships, doing projects with while other projects are, try to coordinate. So we're not doing projects at different times. And if they're in the same location, we want to try to, get their schedules and for transportation projects and other utility projects and coordinate with them. That's important. Regulatory requirements, of course, and then environmental and social justice. And this is, well, hey, do we, where do we look at doing projects? Do we want to prioritize communities that are more, disenfranchised, for example? So those are something to consider in this process. And then lastly, projects that will maybe benefit, Lake Sammamish, or projects near in the lake in State Park, and Mountains of Sound, Greenway Trust is doing a significant restoration project down near the lake in the state park. So those are things we want to also look at and prioritize. And I guess, Gary, I believe you want to take over from here.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Great work. So, folks, I just want to finish off the presentation here by talking this one slide on climate change. We're going to come back to climate change too as one of the questions. So then right after this, we'll get into 6 specific questions for you to kind of talk to us about, and then just open it up for questions as Nancy would like to do. So just so you know, and I said this a little bit before, but and I know a number of you mentioned this, but this topic is really important to me, and I wanted to let you know that I've been working on climate change issues, climate impacts on urban areas for the last 15 years, and I've actually had the opportunity to collaborate with some of you may know the local meteorologist, the legend Cliff Mass. Sometimes shoots his mouth off a little bit too much and gets him kicked off the radio, but he's a great guy to work with, incredible mind. And then also I've worked with the UW Climate Impacts Group. And I had the amazing opportunity to present a climate adaptation for urban area paper in Edinburgh, Scotland, with my colleagues Paul Fleming and Dr. David Hartley. So this topic is very serious to me. So latest predictions, at least for my end, and things maybe tweaked a little bit since I've last looked here, but precipitations, the region of precipitation pattern really changing, so that we have a higher statistical likelihood of these high duration, low intensity storm events, kind of more like a Midwest type of storm. That number actually is increasing statistically. And the other thing that looks like it's going to change is potentially a slight increase in summer precipitation with a lower and decrease in winter, but the volume being the same. So practically, what does that really mean, right? What does that really mean to Issaquah? And things that I'm most concerned about, there's probably even more, but higher peak flows, greater erosive forces in our streams, and then decreased water quality due to that greater sediment input because of those erosive forces. And those are just a few. But this, the precipitation change is really something very serious to us. And how are we going to address that, right? How are we going to address that going forward? We're not alone. Now, there's also some other changes too, right? Potential changes to temperature patterns that might affect, riparian and wetland flora and fauna, right? So it's not just about precipitation, right? But this is where we're going to be digging in a little bit, and again, coordinating, with Megan to see, how stormwater fits in the bigger picture here, because we're, part of that bigger team. So 4 approaches, I'm just going to mention them briefly, and we'll come back more detailed in another slide. But really there's a no action approach, because maybe it's too uncertain. Maybe we're not comfortable doing anything yet, keeping our eyes on it. And when things become more certain with what's going to happen, maybe act then. Then the other 3 really are levels of proactiveness: minimal, moderate, and aggressive. And I'll give you some specific examples that I played around, talked a bit with our public works director about as a starting point. So let's go to the specific questions here, and however best you'd like to respond. I'm just going to skip this. I went over that already. Okay, so question 1, really, this slide was there already, and I just, again, I don't know how best for you all to respond, but Nancy, I'll work with you on this. But how does our overall schedule look to you? This process, the schedule, especially the stakeholder engagement. Just, something like this looks really good, keep going with it, or boy, we're really concerned about this. Just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, he's asked a specific question. So I guess what I'm trying to do is figure out, could someone type something in the chat? Just like Jamie, I'm going to call on you and ask you to type something in the chat, because I don't think the chat's working. Did someone chat type?
Yes, you are correct. It's just working to me. I think I can fix that quickly. If not, then I will have, I will call names, but I think I can fix that quickly.
There, I can see Jamie now. So does anybody have any feedback for Gary on the feedback question number 1 about the overall process? And Jamie, if you have an actual question, you're going to have to type it in again. Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I changed my mic. Hopefully it works. Interrupt me if you can't. Thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing. I can see that you are knee deep in the details. I think for reference for us, it's really, I'm not sure what feedback we have. I think for future reference, we need to have more context. I'm looking at the GIS map. That would have been helpful to have in advance. So we could study some of the issues ourselves. I think the summary, the lacking of the last plan that we made, which looks like it's from about 15 years ago or so, would also be helpful. I think when it comes to presenting to us as the board, we need more historical context to give more productive feedback. I have some other thoughts that I'll save for a little bit later, but I think for stakeholder engagement, having a 72 people is really low. However, I don't know that we're at it sounds like you're not really at a point where people could give more significant feedback. I think for future stuff, when you're talking about prioritizing, it would be ideal to find ways to drive more engagement so we can get real feedback about prioritizing. So I respect that, that's a complicated issue, but I think we need to find ways to engage people more. But overall, I'm finding myself just a little frustrated at following the whole story to give more sufficient feedback. So I think for future, to get more context on previous plans would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Don, you had a comment?
I do. Nice job, you guys. I just want to applaud you on your efforts. I actually think your community feedback of 72 or whatever it was respondents, that's not bad for a city the size of Issaquah. I know how hard it is to get the community to be interactive in these kind of studies. I would ask that as you move forward, I see you got a couple more, 2, 3 community dates on the calendar there. Reach out to your PIOs, find ways to try to leverage that and get more community involvement. I'd like to see as much as we can possibly get on this. And I look forward to seeing more product from this.
Thank you.
Jamie, did you have any question? Did you have a question?
This is Jamie. No, I didn't actually have a question.
Great. Any other comments on the project overview? The chair does have one comment. I'm a little interested in terms of how this ties into the Title 18, because clearly development, which is the land use code, and how lands redevelop will have a big impact on stormwater. And I think there's an opportunity, I talked with Gary a little bit about developing something like a regional stormwater bank, so that instead of having each property owner that redevelops to a higher density as the city moves forward, to potentially, instead of just doing their stormwater management on property, but potentially to do something that may have a bigger bang for its buck. And I'm hoping that we can incorporate not just physical changes or projects into this plan, but to also include code changes that may include things like rainwater capture and reuse in a building, things like that, that are clearly code changes, but also have an opportunity to make a big change in the stormwater systems in the city. So I'm hopeful that we can think about some of those opportunities. Are there any other comments or questions on this for feedback question 1? Okay.
And thank you everyone that talked on that one. Just to let you know, we will be creating this really work. I just completed a utility strategic plan at Redmond over the past couple of years. And what really helped was writing down these questions from y'all. We'll get you a response and just be tracking this so we can so you can see your questions in writing, you can see our responses, and then just continue to do that throughout this process. I think that's a real powerful mechanism.
And Nancy, can I hop in? Sorry, I spoke too soon on not having a question, and I sent it while you were speaking. Is it all right if I hop in? This is Jamie speaking. One question I had for Gary is just looking ahead. We have kind of 2 bunches of meetings. It looks like we have like the June to August and the November to January. I'm curious for this like the bunch between June and August, like what's the feedback or really key decisions that you feel like are going to need to be made at that stage to kind of get to the later stages of the plan?
Great point, Jamie. Yeah, and I probably didn't make it clear enough. I went over it pretty fast. The next bunch, the June, July, August, idea there is policy direction, goals, and performance targets, right? So ideally, getting out to internally, externally, getting some draft stuff, and then as kind of Laura was saying, get you that information beforehand so that we can have a good discussion on it there, right? During our meeting, so you can provide comments about what we've heard, then you tell us more, right? And then we'll go to the city council after that, right? And then the next bunch will be the actions, right? So you'll see what we're kind of proposing, but again, not just capital, the whole list. So that's the idea there.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure. Okay, question 2. Again, this slide you saw before, so there's a lot of words on here, but again, just looking for your thoughts on these set of criterias, right? Because again, we're going to be using this after we have these wonderful projects, operating ideas all keyed up. How do we rank them, right? So this is really, we're going to be using these areas to help weight and compare the project. So your thoughts on this in terms of, do you really, really like a few of them that you wanted to highlight? Are we missing something completely? So just your feeling on this. And again, apologies if you didn't have a chance to look at this before, but that's kind of what I'd like to kind of hear from you on this one.
All right. We're running towards the end of our time, so I'll take a couple of comments. I don't know how important your next few questions are to us, Gary. You may have to send them out in another way.
That's fine. That's totally fine, Nancy.
Because I'm just recognizing, trying to manage the meeting along the way.
Well, Nancy, based on what Laura said, why don't I just go over the questions here? And I've talked to our city, just in case this happened. I've done enough of these. I knew it might take a little long. I think I can send out a survey to each of you to respond. What I would just have to ask is that you can't talk to each other about the questions. You have to give your responses back to me for public disclosure stuff. So I'll figure out how to do that, but we absolutely can make that happen. Not a problem. So
right, and I think what Gary's talking about is that if he sends it out, we don't send our responses to the whole board for a discussion, so we end up having a meeting and email. If you if you're doing feedback to Gary and responding to his questions, you send them back to him, and at some point, hopefully, he'll tell us what we all said.
100% we'll do that. 100% we'll do. Okay, so this will be question 2. Question 3, we want to get an understanding, is our geographic scope right? Right, it's I think it's pretty large, right? So we're trying to touch all the major creek watersheds here, and again, when we say Issaquah Creek, that's all the tributaries, right? So we're going to be asking you about that. It could be that maybe some of you want us just to focus more on one and not on all of them. So we just like to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, question 4, and I'll probably put a little more context when we do the survey here, but really what we're getting at is how should we spend our money, our ratepayer money. Now we collect these, as you may or may not know, from residential and commercial customers. And really we have 3, what I would call 3 big program areas, right? Stormwater conveyance, water quality, and habitat, right? So 3 buckets that we could say. When I was at Seattle, we had 3, business areas separately for each one of those. So we want to get your thoughts on a starting point for having a guidelines for how should we do our spending. So here's an example that I've used in other jurisdictions. And this is all funding. So capital projects, operating work, education outreach, 50% in stormwater and flooding conveyance, 25% in water quality, 25% in habitat. So that would be, we wouldn't have to hit that each year, but maybe on a 6-year rolling average. So we're going to want your comments on that. Okay, question 5, again, I'll probably a little more context here, but some utilities, in addition to getting rates from their customers, also get rates from other departments. One example is the transportation and streets. We could charge them a stormwater fee based on the amount of impervious service in the city, and then generate funding from that. And we could use that kind of as we were talking about a bank, Nancy, use that as a bank for transportation to do their mitigation projects rather than going case by case. So we want you to consider that. And then finally, climate change. Okay, and we're going to give you 4 options here, and lightly what we're going to kind of touch is this minimal, moderate, and aggressive proactive approach in addition to no action. So again, no action would be we're not going to do anything unless required because we really feel like we need to learn more about what the predictions are going to be. We got to wait till those error bounds are a little bit smaller. Minimal approach might be changing the design standards for our new projects like Alan was talking about, right? A moderate approach might be including the minimal, but retrofitting existing stormwater facilities to meet new design standards. We could also estimate what the 100-year floodplain would look like in Issaquah Creek, just for illustrative purposes to see what would happen. And finally, an aggressive approach would be looking to partner with UW or another institute to really bring the precipitation changes into Issaquah. This is a very complicated process called downscaling. I promised Connie I wouldn't get into jargon, but it's a way to estimate, what might happen here in Issaquah as compared to Seattle. Be great to do, but it's money, right? It costs a lot of money, but that'd be an aggressive approach. So we're going to ask your feedback on that. So thank you for your time. I know this was a lot, and it's good to kind of know how you want to operate, maybe a little bit more information beforehand. But like I said, Alan and I are always here, answer questions. We're looking forward to coming back to you. And, I'll just end on, I think, I've known Alan for 20 years or so. I think he and I are as passionate about this work as all of you are, and that's pretty darn passionate. So, we are here to serve you and the community. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much for your presentation to both Gary and Alan, what I'd like to suggest is if you have additional questions or comments, that you direct those to Gary, and I assume that you'll share them. And it sounds like we're going to have some homework to do out of this, and you probably, as I've suggested to Megan in the past, it's best if we have a date for when you want those responses so that we're timely, and put that right up front, maybe in the questions that you ask us, so that we provide timely responses to you, because I know most people are very busy. And then send those directly to Gary instead of to all of the environmental boards, so we do not conduct a meeting via email. So any other questions or comments? It sounds like Don has a quick question. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, it's just on the process, Nancy. When we send that, Megan, Nancy, do you want to be CC'd on those question replies?
I don't think so. At this point, I don't think so. I think you just send it directly to Gary, and then we'll expect Gary to come back to us so that we can just try to keep us out of that process. If that's okay.
Gary, will you compile those and provide the questions and answers back to us?
Yeah, what I think I'm going to do generally, going to do a couple of things to make this all around the same page. I'm going to send, well, through Megan, all of you the rules of the game, like how this survey will work, so we're all understand. Then yeah, get them back, and then I will compile it. And I think I'm gonna assume that you're okay with me telling you what people said individually, unless you tell me you're going to want it anonymous, and I'm fine doing that either way, but I'll put that in the directions as well too. But yes, I will commit to compiling it and sending a report out to everybody. Absolutely.
Great. Any other quick comments or questions on this topic? Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. There was a lot of material there. I will have a few more questions I might send to you directly, Gary. I think I've sent you some previously, just to respond to along the way. I do have one quick question, and that is the basin characterization reports. I know some people were interested in seeing those, or potentially when might they be available to the environmental board to actually review if there's interest.
Gary, well, Gary, you go ahead and speak. Well, they're ready anytime. Yeah, like I said, they're still a draft, but this is like the second, go through with ecology and other reviewers, so they're pretty much complete. I don't know that we're gonna make any more changes, but yeah, they're certainly available. Just let me know how you want me to, the best way to get them disseminated. So
I'll work with Megan and Nancy on that, but that'd be great to get that out sooner rather than later.
That would be great. Thank you very much. It sounds like the board is interested in seeing those, so I think that would be very helpful to get those out sooner.
We can add that with the survey probably at the same time. So if there's comments on that, we can hear that back as well. That might just be more efficient.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes this portion of our agenda. We're going to move on to the next agenda topic at this point in time, and that is the NPDES 2021 Stormwater Management Program Plan. And Evan Broomfield will be presenting that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to bring him into presenter mode. I think that's what it's called.
I think I'm already here. Can you guys all hear me? Okay, all right. I'll share my screen here. Can you guys all see my PowerPoint? Yes? All right. So hello, hi, my name's Evan Brumfield. I'm an environmental and regulatory program administrator here for the city. Myself and two of my colleagues, Brian Hesmillo and Julie Ortiz, we kind of handle all environmental and regulatory compliance for the city. Here tonight, I'm going to talk about our 2021 Stormwater Management Program Plan, which essentially we're going to talk about how we do it in Issaquah is we talk about our 2020, basically a high-level summary of our permit implementation for NPDES requirements, and then we'll touch on some 2021 work plan items as well as far as our NPDES permit compliance. So what is NPDES? It is it's a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. So it's kind of a mouthful, but basically how we get here is in 1972 there was the Clean Water Act, and federal requirements under the Clean Water Act regulated stormwater discharges to waters of the state. So then EPA granted delegated authority to Washington State to enforce these requirements through the Department of Ecology. So then Ecology now enforces the Clean Water Act through what's called the NPDES permit. And what this is essentially it allows Issaquah to discharge our stormwater to a water of the state, which is our creeks, our lakes, our groundwater, all that kind of stuff. And how they do that, how it pertains to Issaquah, is our Phase 2 Issaquah Municipal Stormwater Permit. These permits are issued in 5-year cycles. Sometimes they're amended to extend a year, but this permit cycle started August 1st and will go through July of 2024. So the goal of the NPDES, it's to reduce the discharge of pollutants from the city's municipal separate stormwater or system MS4 to the maximum extent practicable to protect water quality. So we kind of touched on what MS4 means in the previous presentation, but it's essentially anything that the publicly owns that conveys stormwater. So that's our catch basins, our pipes, our ditches, our roadways that have stormwater drainage systems on them. All those are part of our MS4. So the NPDES permit is broken down in different permit sections. Section 5 of the permit is the most, what I like to call the meat and potatoes of the permit, and that's where we have a lot of our kind of programmatic and regulatory requirements. This presentation, I'll kind of take us through each kind of section of Section 5 and then 2 additional sections of the permit, TMDLs and monitoring assessment. So the next couple of slides, I'll be talking about stormwater planning section, public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, MS4 mapping and documentation, our IDDE, controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites, operations and maintenance, and source control programs for existing development. All those with the asterisks are part of that Section 5 of the permit. The other 2 sections we'll touch on is our total maximum daily load, which is essentially a water cleanup plan that pertains to Issaquah for fecal coliform in our streams. And then we'll talk about monitoring and assessment. So the Stormwater Management Program Plan. It's a set of actions and activities comprising the components listed in Section 5 and any additional actions necessary to meet the requirements. So that's why we're including in our TMDL and monitoring and assessment sections. So the first section, stormwater planning. I'll kind of blaze over this a little bit pretty quick because you guys just got a long presentation on this exact topic. But just as kind of a high level overview, the city is electing to meet our stormwater management action planning requirement by doing our storm and surface water master plan. And like Gary touched on in his presentation, NPDES requires us to act on one catchment area or one watershed within the city, where our stormwater surface master plan is really going to act. We're going to have a plan for all 6 of our catchment areas. In 2021, we'll continue with this work, and so as part of that storm and surface water master plan, like Alan talked about, there was a creation of an interdepartmental team where we really got a citywide knowledge base to really bring in all different perspectives for this master plan. And part of the goals or part of the tasks of that interdepartmental team were to also assess low impact development barriers, as well as how to implement the SMAP requirements, and then how water quality is implemented in our comprehensive planning documents. As far as permit required deadlines for this. They're not really until 2022, and so we are on track for meeting this permit requirement. Next up is public education and outreach. They're programs designed to reduce or eliminate behaviors and practices that cause or contribute to adverse stormwater impacts and encourage the public to participate in stewardship opportunities. So in the city, we have a very wide, comprehensive public education and outreach program. We're actually fairly fortunate in that. One of the 2020 requirements was to evaluate the effectiveness of our ongoing behavior change campaign. We elected not to do that, and that is allowed in the NPDES because we are changing our shift in focus for our behavior change campaign. Traditionally, our ongoing behavior change campaign has been working with businesses on providing them education on hazardous waste storage, how to implement proper best management practices in their business to reduce stormwater discharge or illicit discharges. And we're going to continue with that program, but we're just not going to use it for our behavior change campaign. We've chose to shift to a regional campaign, which is the dumpster lid campaign. And that kind of sticker you kind of see right here where it says shut it. We've worked with we're working with Recology, our waste hauler. We're going to stick this sticker on a couple dumpsters. We're going to be working with a couple businesses to really work with them to keep their dumpster lid shut. And why do we want their lid shut is many different reasons. One is to reduce contamination. The number two big one for stormwater is that rainwater gets inside the dumpsters and it creates rust, which then rust holes out in the bottom, which then causes all that dumpster juice and leachate to fall on the ground below it and flow to the nearest storm drain. So we'll be implementing that over this next year in 2021. And that is really just starting to gear up right now. We also participate in the Puget Sound Starts Here campaign. We provide funding for stormwater marketing and outreach for that as part of our regional campaigns. We have our business technical assistant visits where we're going in and visiting all our different businesses here in town. We talk to them about wellhead protection. We talk to them about hazardous waste and disposal, stormwater infrastructure maintenance, their fats, oils, and greases at restaurants and how they're storing them, dumpsters. We really try to talk to them about everything that we do. And that's partially funded by our interagency agreement with Department of Ecology, the Pollution Prevention Assistance Program. Last year, we completed, I believe, 49 visits. Or 46, but we traditionally have many more than that, but we were kind of fortunate to get that many with kind of COVID shutdowns and protections for both staff and businesses. We also partner with CWA, Cascade Water Alliance. They go into our Issaquah schools and they provide, well, in the past, they went into Issaquah schools and provided education to grade-specific classes. They pivoted much like all of us last year with COVID, and they brought on a vendor on board that created online resources. Those resources were, again, catered to grade-specific levels, and they were accessed from the time they were put online in April of 2020. They were accessed nearly 8,000 times last year. So they really got a lot of good access to those. And some of the examples of what those topics were on were ecosystems, watersheds, and humans and water. So really, it's a really good, cool program that Cascade Water Alliance does. Then we also hosted 2 waste collection and recycling events. We did that towards the end of the year. It was grant funded, which was awesome. And in those 2 events, we collected nearly 90,000 pounds of waste and recyclables. And we were able to manage those appropriately and environmentally. So we're really happy with the turnout of that. So the next section is public involvement and participation. That's why I'm here today. But we do that many different ways here in Issaquah. We have our Issaquah Insider and News Flash, which was how the Stormwater Master Plan, or the Stormwater Management Plan got sent out. You may have received the email. I sent it to you directly as well. We also have our City Council, where there's a lot of public meetings, as well as our boards and commissions. In 2020, we had our Rivers and Streams Board that was phasing out, and now we've transitioned to our environmental board this year. Then we have our Issaquah Stormwater Permit webpage, which has all the permit documentation that you would need to see, including where the Stormwater Management Program Plan will end up. Not this presentation, but the document, as well as our annual report, which is this Stormwater Management Plan accompanies the annual report as far as our NPDES permit obligations. So number 4 is our MS4 mapping and documentation. We're lucky here in Issaquah that we have a fairly comprehensive GIS program, considering it's a one-man show. He's a rock star, and he has a couple people that help him as well. But yeah, he's amazing with what he can do with being a one-man show. So in 2020, we had a new permit requirement, which required us to begin to collect the size and material for all our outfalls. We had already had our outfalls mapped on GIS, and we have an ongoing facility inventory that our operations staff is doing of our stormwater infrastructure. And so we were able to, all those pipes that we've already inventoried and ID'd, we added attributes to our outfall layer. And so now we have a nice happy outfall layer with all the attributes that ecology wants. As far as for next year, ecology is requiring, we have all mapping electronic, which we already have that. So we're good to go. So number 5 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. This is an ongoing program designed to prevent, detect, characterize, trace, and eliminate illicit connections and illicit discharges into the MS4. In Issaquah, our IDD program is fairly reactionary. We're not as proactive as we would like. This is primarily our spill response. So a lot of these, so you see 61 IDD investigated, corrected. A lot of these are vehicle accidents or equipment failure from garbage collection vehicles. They're also, we also identify them in our business technical assistant visits. So when we're walking around with our contact on that site, we're pulling up catch basin lids and grates and looking in them, seeing what it looks like, if it needs to be maintenance, but we're also looking for what is here in this picture, which is grease. So what had happened in this instance is a business owner, or not a business owner, someone who worked at this business was taking all their leftover fryer grease, walking out back and just dumping it right into a storm drain. So in that instance, what we would do is we would educate that business owner on the proper way to dispose of that, as well as work with them to get that cleaned up immediately and make sure that there's no further downstream impacts. So yeah, that's part of our kind of business technical assistant visits as well. We also, over the first 2 years of this permit, in 2019 and 2020, we've averaged 12% of our MS4 field screened, which is our operations staff going out in dry weather, pulling up catch basin lids, looking in them, smelling, hearing, using all their senses to really see if there's anything that shouldn't be in there. And if there is something that kind of, gets their spidey sense tingling a little bit, they escalate that, and then we do further field investigation as necessary. We also have our field staff trained annually, as well as our businesses. When we're going in and talking with them on these technical assistant visits, we're talking to them about illicit discharges. And in 2021, we will really continue to do all these same items. Number 6, controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites. This program is to reduce pollutants and stormwater runoff to our MS4 from new development, redevelopment, and construction site activities. The program does apply to both public and private projects, including roadways. So in 2020, we inspected 68 sites for TESE compliance. TESE is temporary erosion and sediment control. It's inspections that our site inspectors do on these large or small construction sites, ensuring that all sediment is contained on their site and has no likelihood of coming off their site. We completed 253 of those TESE inspections on those 68 sites, and those resulted in 5 TESE enforcements. So those enforcements could be a stop work order. That could also be monetary penalties as well. City staff, again, that's another opportunity that we provide training during these pre-construction pre-cons. Our site inspectors are talking to them about illicit discharges and stormwater and how to ensure that all their BMPs, best management practices, are kept up on their site. And as well as if they have any of these releases or discharges, we're again taking that as an opportunity to provide some education to them as well. Not only enforcement, but education. And then in 2021, we will start our new stormwater standards and manual update process. By June of 2022, we are required to update our stormwater standards and manual. And so we will just be starting that process this year to make sure we have a thorough process for that, which will include most coming back and doing the roadshow at our various boards and commissions. Number 7 is operation and maintenance. If you talk to, well, you don't talk to, but low impact development is a hard thing to maintain for our operations and maintenance crew. And in order, instead of ignoring it, not saying that people ignore it, but the city has electively been proactive in how we are maintaining our low impact development. And so a couple years ago, we purchased the Triveris Municipal Cleaning Vehicle, or the MCV. And with that, we've been able to maintain 289,000 square feet of pervious surfaces. And those are our porous concrete sidewalks. We have Rainier Boulevard, that is a pervious pavement. We have parking lots that are pervious pavement. So this piece of equipment gets a lot of use, and it's run a lot and really does a really good job. So we also annually inspect our private treatment and flow control BMPs, and as well we have public as well that we're annually inspecting. So we have 45 private treatment facilities that we're inspecting, and we have 329 public that we're annually inspecting and sometimes providing maintenance to if needed. We also removed 1,000 pounds of trash from 20 sites within our parks and open spaces. This is important because a lot of times these sites are within our critical areas or along our streams, and so removing that potential pollution from those critical areas is very necessary. In 2021, along with our stormwater manual update process that I touched on in the previous slide, we're going to be looking at our SOPs, our standard operating procedures that we have for all our maintenance programs. And as that the stormwater manual and standard process comes along, we'll be looking at our SOPs along the way. And so the final Section 5 permit requirement I talk about is source control. Currently, there's no permit requirements for this, but starting next year is when those permit requirements will be coming in. Next year, I'm talking about 2022. And with that, we will be starting our source control code updates. We do have some source control code currently, but we're going to be looking at that and potentially updating it to meet the NPDES permit obligations, and that will be taken care of alongside our stormwater standards update as well. But just wanted to touch on that we do have an existing source control program. We've had, I mentioned it earlier in this presentation, it's the interagency agreement with ecology. We've been going to businesses since 2008 for that program, but we also have a private stormwater infrastructure inspection program as well. And so most likely we will somehow morph those two programs into one to meet the NPDES permit obligations. The good news is we've already been meeting with these property owners and business owners, talking to them about this kind of stuff. And so when this new permit requirement comes on board, it won't be a shock to them that we're going to be working with them over this same kind of stuff.
Evan, I need to interrupt just for a minute. I wanted to check in with the board to see if it's okay. We're running a little long on this, and we need some time for questions if there are any or comments. Is anyone on the board, please put in the chat, just type in if you have a comment, but I'd like to propose that we extend the meeting till 9 p.m. Anyone have an issue with that, please indicate in the chat. Okay, seeing nobody at this point, the meeting will continue until 9 p.m. and I'm going to keep trying to manage the time. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. I just have 2 more slides, so won't be too much longer. So Issaquah, so TMDL, total maximum daily load. What is that? It's what I kind of touched on a little bit. It's essentially a water cleanup plan. And the cleanup plan that pertains to Issaquah is the Issaquah Creek Basin Water Cleanup Plan for Fecal Coliform Bacteria. That's for a 2004 report by Ecology. And in the NPDES permit, we have, since we have a TMDL identified by Ecology, we have a permit requirement associated with that. That is to perform bacteria sampling within our MS4 alongside our IDDE inspections, field screening that our operations staff is doing. So anytime our operations staff is getting into kind of a new area doing their field screening, they let us environmental staff know, and we go out and perform bacteria screening. If they come back hotter or higher than what we like to see, then we do a more in-depth field investigation to see the potential cause of it. But in addition to that, we also provide pet waste bags in all our parks and open spaces. This was a permit requirement in our previous round of the permit, the 2013-2018 permit. We've elected to obviously keep going with this because we see the value. And we also do septic inspections and outreach for our residences in the city that are on septic. And right now, currently, this program is only for residences that are within 200 feet of our sewer system. And so if they're in failure, we'll have them connect to sewer. And so as you can kind of see these 2 little pictures here, these are some examples of the Puget Sound Starts Here campaign that we buy into for marketing and outreach material. So it's just kind of show you kind of what we kind of get out of it. So in last, monitoring and assessment, we pay into a regional fund that is managed by the Stormwater Action Monitoring. And there's really 3 separate studies that we pay into. It's effectiveness studies, receiving water studies, and source identification studies. So this is where we really see trends in how our stormwater requirements are, the implementation of our stormwater requirements, are they being seen in our receiving water bodies? We're also looking to see if the stormwater treatment devices that we are putting in, are they actually effective in what they're saying they are removing? We're looking at maintenance, turnaround, catch basin cleaning to see maybe we don't need to be cleaning as often, or maybe we need to be cleaning more often. They're all things that we're trying to sort out to really see if all these requirements that we're doing, if we are seeing the benefit of it. In addition to the NPDES permit, we also have our ambient monitoring of surface waters, which Gary and Alan kind of touched on. We've been doing that, I think, since the late 90s in Issaquah. We compile all that into our State of the Waters report. The last one was in 2010, and then the next one will be a part of our Storm and Surface Water Master Plan. And that's it.
So Evan, before I open it up for questions, it's my understanding that I know you sent this out to all of us to review along the way. And personally, I have a few specific questions on the actual document, the actual plan that you're submitting. What is your deadline for that?
It's March 31st, but the public comment is open until through next Monday, the 29th, I believe.
All right, are there any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none. I guess I'm curious, Evan, about
Nancy. I do see one from Dawn.
Okay. Dawn, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Evan, I'm curious about your IDDE program. You mentioned that you guys have about 68 investigations you did on average. How many of those get reported by the public? I mean, like somebody seeing a contractor that spills paint, or somebody seeing something that they think is polluting the waterways, versus the ones that are just reported by car accidents by the police department or fire?
Sure, like our hotline calls is what you're kind of asking. So I'd say, so 61 is actually a lower number than what we normally have, and that could have been for a lot of different factors, COVID being one. But I would say on a normal year, we get probably under 10 as far as that we get called like a hotline call.
Okay. That sounds low to me. I'd like to see maybe some public outreach, or think about a way that you can get that hotline number out to more people so they're more aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or others? Well, I have a question, and that is with regards to septic tanks. Why are we focusing only on ones within 200 feet of the sewer system instead of septic tanks that can be contributing to water quality issues in streams that are farther than 200 feet away from an existing sewer line?
So that is traditionally what we've been doing, and we're actually in the middle of doing our sewer master plan, and in that we will be talking about septic systems as well. So most likely expanding, but that's to be determined in the sewer master plan. But
and how many septic systems do we have in the city that we know of?
In our inspection program, we have right around 50, but I believe there is, I can get back to you on that with the exact number, but I believe it's 300 to 400.
Thank you. Anne, you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Evan, I just wanted to say I used to work at the post office. I worked there for 35 years, and I don't know if it's happening now because I retired, but they didn't close the lids for their bins for a long time. So that might be one place to look to see if you can get them to start closing their lids.
Some insider knowledge.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, how could this paper be recycled? It's all wet. Mm-hmm. So thanks for letting us know about that.
Yeah, thanks, Anne.
Don, go ahead. It looks like you have another question.
Yeah, just a quick one for Evan. You said the public comment period's open until the 29th. With that public commenting, would that be coming directly to you then?
No, in the memo I gave you, there is an email address to send it to. It's swmpcomments@swa.gov. at issaquahwa.gov.
Okay. And are you looking for further comment from this group if we have it?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Evan.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Well, with that, thank you very much, Evan, for your presentation and the time you spent with us tonight. Just as a reminder to the board and to the public that's potentially listening in, please review the document, the plan that was presented, that this was just a summary of, and get your comments to that email address that Evan identified by the 29th, if you have any. With that, we've concluded that, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 5, and that's reports. And I'm going to turn this over to Megan.
Great, this is Megan. Thank you, Nancy. So I have a few items to report out on today, this evening. The first one is on the electric vehicle ordinance that we talked about at our last meeting a couple weeks ago. So the ordinance went to this group, and you guys provide your final recommendation on that. So that has that was presented to the Planning Policy Commission, and then will be going to City Council as well. So the Planning Policy Commission was similar in that they recommended the electric vehicle ordinance proceed, and they had a couple pieces of feedback for that, which will be included in the summary materials that are going to council. So the next meeting on that topic will be on Monday, April 5th at the City Council meeting, and council is expected to take action on that. So you're welcome to watch that, or I'll provide a report out back on that later. So thank you again for that meeting that we had to go through that recommendation report last time. The next item I wanted to mention was that we have the environmental awards. We had our mayor's subcommittee talk about the nominations that we received. We got some really great candidates, and the final processes are going through that now to see who the decision makers or who the award winners will be. Some very tough decisions, I'm sure. And originally we had said that those were going to be presented at our April 14th board meeting. As you will see in the schedule, we do not have an April 14th board meeting anymore. The 2 April meetings are on April 19th and April 28th. So the environmental awards will be presented at that April 28th meeting, and that will be at 6 p.m. So we're doing a little bit of an earlier time for that. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that, and we're looking forward to inviting those award winners and having that presentation. And we will be notifying the public of who the winners are before that meeting, so that people will be able to schedule to attend. So that will be coming out in early April, who those award winners are. The next item I want to talk about is that April is coming up, which is Earth Month here in Issaquah. So I thought it might be of particular interest to this board that we always celebrate Earth Month in Issaquah. This year and last year, we have wanted to do bigger events, but instead we're going to be celebrating mostly with some smaller events and also some webinars. So we'll have a full listing of events happening around Issaquah, both by the city and our partner organizations, several nonprofits, posted to our website. So we'll start promoting that out in early April, and I will send that along to the board, and members of the public can find that listing of events on our website, issaquahwa.gov/Earth Month. So we're starting to populate that now, and we'll have several things that the city is doing. We'll be giving out rain barrels and compost bins for free for any residents that want them. We were able to purchase those through a grant from King County. So that will be one of the items that we'll be doing. There'll be a recycling webinar by Recology about kind of the education of what you can do with what and how to reduce your overall waste as well. Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park has a walk that they're going to be doing in the park, educational, and also some events and restoration events there. And Downtown Issaquah Association is going to be doing their annual Keep Issaquah Beautiful Day. So there's lots of things to check out. So we hope that you will all look at that event website. The last thing I wanted to mention was I know we've been receiving a few webinars and conference items from members of the public, and some of them are they're all able to, everyone's able to attend, but as you all know, we do try to make sure we do not have a quorum at events. So I just wanted to let you know, as we receive those events from the public, if there are some that you're interested in attending, please just send Nancy and I an email just so we're aware and can keep tabs just to make sure that we don't have more than 4 members going. If there is great interest in an event, we can approach that when that happens. But if there are events, again, that are coming to the Environmental Board email address that you're interested in attending, if you can just let us know so we can track those, that would be really helpful. And I think that is all for my reports.
I have a question. Is it okay if I ask a question? Or should I put it in the chat?
Go ahead.
Cool. So if the event, if nobody can communicate at the event because it's something that you're watching, but participants can't see each other or communicate, does the quorum still matter?
It is my understanding that it does. If it's items that could be related to the upcoming event of the upcoming items of the board at a time, even if they're not able to communicate, it's my understanding that we still cannot have a quorum at those events.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Megan, for your presentation on that, on the reports. Moving on to the next agenda topic, which is other business and announcements, which is to discuss the upcoming meeting schedule that's coming up, which you all received in the packet. I think it was in the most recent packet that went out.
I believe Laura had a comment. Is that correct?
I do. I can wait till you finish your sentence. That's great.
Okay. Sorry, Nancy.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't see that, Laura. It's hard to manage everything at the same time. Thank you. But I just want to remind everyone that the meeting on the 19th is at 7 p.m. and it's with the City Council. And Megan and I haven't had a conversation about how that's going to run, but there will be other board members there, other boards there as well. So it'll be a very large meeting. So we're more listening, and I think the next meeting we get the opportunity to actually provide feedback and comments. So with that, sorry, Laura, I missed your comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will preface with that. Again, I'm from New York City, so we're direct, and I know that consistently in Seattle that is taken as offensive, so please don't take my comments that way, but just know that that's how we do it. I just think that for future meetings, I would like to see personally more discussion time. I feel like we've had several meetings and the prep materials haven't led towards really clarifying what the action is we're taking. I recognize we're ramping up, but this meeting, I noticed that most people who responded were very technically experienced in water management. And I think it's a loss that it seems that the rest of us aren't able to be prepared to participate at the level. So probably asking for more clear what the action items are when we're getting shared these materials in advance would be helpful so we can know what points are and what questions we might need beforehand to provide and respond just saying, you know, what's the context so that we know whether we're missing context so we don't have to wait until now. But I think it's a miss that we spent a lot of time listening to presentations that could have been more concise. And I would rather see the feedback of the people on this board who are making time to participate. I think it's a lost opportunity. So for future meetings, I think that would be helpful. I'm happy to help with preparing those so it's not more work for someone else, but I do think it's a bummer.
Thank you, Laura. As Gary had explained to all of you, that I did spend some time trying to get a little more information into his presentation, especially for folks that are not in the industry day in and day out. But Megan and I will work on that with the various presenters and take an effort to try and get that to happen in we'll have an offline conversation between Megan, Jamie, and I, and try and see what we can do to help make that happen. So, but feedback like that is always welcome, and we'll see what we can do to handle it. Any other questions or comments? Fortunately, in this meeting, we didn't take action. Most of it was for information or just discussion or just to get some feedback. I think we have much more meaty information coming on stormwater in future months. So we look forward to all that. Is there any other feedback or comments or questions for the good of the order before we adjourn the meeting?
Sorry, one more thing. Just as an aside, I do think that the point that the guy brought up in the beginning about the school being constructed, I do think that that's relevant. That is sort of technically part of what we do, even though it's not projects, but issuing advisory. I think, again, doing discussion on that, I'm sure lots of us have misgivings about that development happening.
Okay, that's something that we'll talk about offline with Megan and see what we can do to bring that forward. And I think our next meeting is coming up fairly shortly. And without any other comments or questions, seeing none, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your time and participation. Good night.